Hello everyone and welcome to another tutorial video. Before we start, I just want to say that I do Twitch streaming every Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday and Sunday, so if you have any questions or if you just want to chat and hang out for a bit, I'm always around, so feel free to check out my Twitch channel if you just want to be part of the community a little bit. I do tend to play video games, but I do art streams too, so if you're interested in that, feel free to check it out. Now, this particular video is more like an optimization to the conversion from FaceRig to Vtube Studio. I absolutely love and adore Vtube Studio right now. They are doing such great work with the program and they are constantly updating. So I do recommend it. It's a really good step up from FaceRig at this point, and it really does. It's a huge game changer, and it does allow for much more customization of movement overall. And it just, I don't know, like generally speaking, you can add even more special poses and definition and animation too to your model. You can make as many shortcuts as you want and be able to make your character animate more and also be able to create more potential facial expressions. Unlike FaceRig, where it was very limited, there was only so many special poses or animations and expressions that you can do. This whole video, because you guys, especially if you've been following my tutorials, it makes sense to make a video to help you optimize your model a little bit more for Vtube Studio, or just to kind of introduce you certain features now that you can play with in regards to what you can do to upgrade your current Vtuber model if you've been using FaceRig for as long as I've been using it, you know. So yeah, in any case, I'll show you how to go about doing that and explain the things, even what's different. What you're able to do now, and this is a very big change and it's one I'm going to show you how to do, is that you can effectively separate the head movement from the body movement. And that means you can finally use the body parameters that you were given. That was something you couldn't do with FaceRig. In fact, FaceRig has a very different way of using the body parameters, and I think you can only use the body X parameter specifically too. I don't think you could use any of the other parameters. The body X parameter for FaceRig is more like an actual physical toggle that you can do for yourself. So say for example, if you had your character, say in this position that you're seeing right now looking at the viewer, you could actually make the character look to the right and be solidly always looking to the right, like it's a quarter view Vtuber model. And in some ways that is actually a pretty cool little toggle, but not the most practical at the same time. And in fact, why would you use a toggle like that if you've already rigged your Vtuber model to be able to look to the side properly anyway? So I'm going to show you how to separate the head from the body. It's actually fairly straightforward. It might be a little bit confusing, but just stick with me and we'll be able to get through this. So before we get started with separating the head pieces from the body pieces and putting them in their own body parameters, in my case here, I don't actually have the body parameters in the parameter window here because I didn't need them. I just tried to delete them so that I can make space, but now I don't have them. I now need to make the body parameters again. To be able to do that, all you have to do is go on New Parameter right here. Now type in body X and then go into the ID field here and go param body angle X. Then go in the minimum and type in 10. And then go on the maximum and type in 10. Now basically you just need to make two other parameters. We've done the body X, we're going to do the body Y. And use the same naming convention, only put a Y on the end of it. So body param angle Y. And then change it again to -10 and maximum 10. Now you just saw that I made a mistake with the parameter, so I just wanted to use this as an example of not everything is set in stone. You can change it if you made a mistake. So just right click and edit parameter, and it's as simple as that. You can just edit whatever you want here. Put a space in between the body Y and you're okay. You could do that with all of the other fields here too. So finally, the next one will be body Z. Okay, so we now have the body parameters restored, so we can use them. Now, go up to the angle X and Y. All you have to do is click on one of the keyforms on the X and Y angle. When you click on the keyform, you'll notice this little dialog box. You've got a little downwards arrow. Just hover your mouse over it and click on select. Now it will have highlighted all the deformers that you've used for this character in the X and Y parameter. What we need to do is sift through the deformers that are to do with the head. We need to deselect the warp deformers that have any association with the head, so that we can single out the body and transfer it over to the body parameters. So in this case, we've got warp deformer of hair front. So if you just hold down the control key and click like that, it will deselect the deformer. So we just do that for the rest here. All of the ones to do with the head, we need to get rid of. Deselect it so that we don't end up passing all of the values for the head onto the body by accident. So we go, we've got all of these bits here, the head X and Y. Even stuff like the blush, we don't need that to be transferred over to the body parameters. Eyes, mouth, nose, more hair, head back. So we should have all of the body deformers selected at this point. But now that we have all of these selected, all of the right deformers selected for the body, it might be easiest for us to actually temporarily unlink the angle X and Y parameters so that they're separate like this. Right click on the keyform again, and we're going to click on change. So what we're going to do is look for the new parameters that we've added, which is the body X, Y, and Z. Make sure that since this is angle X, that you put the values of angle X into the body X parameter. Otherwise, it might get a little confusing. So we're going to click on body X and click OK. So now everything that we've highlighted is in the body X parameter. Now you're going to notice though, however, that the other keyforms are not there, but we're going to get to that in a minute. We need to transfer everything first. So now we just need to go on angle Y, right click again on the keyform, go on change, and then find body Y and transfer it over. Then we can actually link this back up again, and you'll see that the head is moving by itself and it's not linked to the body anymore. Okay, so as you can see, we've transferred the deformers onto the body X and Y parameters. However, we don't see the other keyforms. They have disappeared from the left and right, and it's because the X and Y parameters have a value of 30.0 to minus 30.0. So they've definitely got a bigger value going on in comparison to the minus 10 and 10.0 that we've added to the body parameters. So that means we do need to adjust it. And it is possible to do. All you have to do is go onto the middle keyform here, go onto the arrow and click on adjust. Now these are the original values of the keyforms, and this is the part that you have to edit to make it right for the current values of the parameter. So if you just double click and put in minus 10, like we did for the parameter, make sure you press enter as well, otherwise it won't actually confirm the values that you've inputted. So just again, double click on this one, change it to 10.0 and press enter. Once you're done, go on OK. And then we have the keyforms. Because originally they were just outside of the scale because it was just too big, basically. So now we've brought it back to normal, and the turning of the body is no problem at all. It works. So of course we're going to have to do that with the body Y parameter here. So go on adjust, do the same thing, minus 10.0 and maximum 10.0. Click OK. And again, we have the movement of the body Y and X moving as according to how it should. Now, I would recommend linking those together just like the X and Y parameters. So that means we have a little bit more kind of circular movement going on here. And of course, body Z is optional. It's really up to you whether or not you want to give your character a little bit of a lean to the left or right. That's what the body Z is mostly about. I do technically have a leaning left and right motion going on in the standard angle Z parameter. It's now currently in the angle Z parameter here, so we just do the same thing again. Just highlight the keyform here. Now we don't want the head rotation, so we're going to hold down the control key and click the head rotation so we can get rid of it. And we're left with the main body rotation. Then we're going to go on change and find the body Z parameter and click OK. We're going to have to adjust the keyforms again, so click on the keyform again, right click, go on adjust, and change the values to minus 10 again, and the maximum value 10. And click enter. And there we go. The rotation of the body is now in the body Z parameter. And the head is now completely separate to the body. So if I just change the head position here, you'll notice that the head and the body are separate. Now, I will say by doing stuff like this, it really depends on how much work you put into your model. You may have to make some adjustments if you plan to go this far with your model. It's worth it though, I will say, because it does give your character a whole other dimension of movement. And because of the settings you can adjust in Vtube Studio, as far as like how fast the head can turn and nod up and down, and you can make the body slightly slower than the head, and it really does kind of create a separation of movement, and it really does bring it to life a little bit. And there's no getting away from the fact that, sadly, as of now anyway, as I'm making this video, there is no way for the webcam to detect your body movement. So it's always going to be based off your head movement with the webcam. But those kinds of differences, being able to kind of desync the timing of both the head and the body, it does give it a whole other dimension of movement, like I say. So I do recommend it, but it does mean that if you've done any heavy animations already, like special actions in FaceRig terms, or maybe even some special poses here and there, you may have to adjust things accordingly. So just to bear that in mind a little bit. But I would recommend at this point, if you do make any really big changes, do save a backup of your previous model just in case something goes a bit wrong and you need to kind of go back to the way things were. But it is worth it, like I say. This is actually the pretty standard way of doing models, actually making VTuber models, is to have separate body parameters from the head. And in my case, that's the X and Y parameters. So yeah, it's worth it, I think, and it's really cool. Now that we've done that, that's the major big thing that I wanted to touch on because I felt like it was quite important to let you all know about that. There is a few more things I'd like to touch on about Vtube Studio and some of the changes. Currently, there is a way of making an idle animation for your VTuber model instead of relying completely on the breathing parameters like I've shown you in previous videos. Now, I just really wanted to quickly touch on the concept of making idle animation in Vtube Studio. There is something more you can do. You can still use the breathing parameters. There's still some really good use out of using the breathing parameter, and I actually would recommend using the breathing parameters because at least it's all set in a parameter once it's done, and you don't really have to worry about making additional shortcuts for actual animation files. But I'm just going to very quickly show you what I mean by that. If we go into Vtube Studio, you have an option to select a motion-free.json file as an idle animation for your Vtuber model. So as you can see, it's playing out. You can see that the arms are swaying a little bit. We've got some breathing going on as well. And the cool thing about using an actual motion-free.json file is that you can literally animate whatever you want. You can get the timing exactly to the way you want it to be using the animation timeline in Live2D. There is some pluses to being able to do that in the fact that you don't have to limit yourself to the breathing intervals in terms of animation. However, it does mean it's a little bit more of a faff around. Let's say, as much as you can have an idle animation for, say, this character right now, and it's great, I guess, if you're someone who doesn't really have too many complex things going on with their model. Because say, for example, like with the previous video that I'd done, which is of the jelly character, with its transformation and its wings, I have technically, potentially, a lot more idle animations going on in that model than, say, this one, which only needs the one because there's no transformations going on with the character, let's say. So if I was to just actually bring out what I mean, I'm just going to change out with my jelly model. So this is my current jelly model right now, and they do actually have a transformation, so that's on a shortcut key. All the movement, all of the actual idle animation that you're seeing right now, that is happening on the basis of the breathing parameter. So like these little ear wings here, that is moving on the basis of the breathing interval. However, if I wanted to utilize the motion-free.json file, I would have to set a shortcut. And there's ways of making shortcuts, of course. If you go on this here, you have like a whole list of potential shortcuts you can make for yourself. If you want to make a new one, all you have to do is go all the way to the bottom of the list and click on the plus, and you can assign a file. So in this case, a motion-free file, which is your idle animation. And you do have something called change idle animation right here. So you would have to select that, and presumably, because I've not done it yet, it will actually swap out the idle animation that you currently have to something else. Now, the issue I have with that is potentially that's a hell of a lot more shortcuts that you have to consider, especially if you're someone who doesn't have a Stream Deck, because Stream Deck is actually really good for the fact that you can put multiple shortcuts to one button press. So if you're someone who doesn't have that ability to do that or have a Stream Deck, that can be a little bit cumbersome, really, because there's potentially a lot that can be done with these shortcuts. There's a lot of shortcuts you could end up having over a course of time, making your models and making all their animations and making all of the on and off toggles and stuff. So personally for me, I actually think that as much as it's nice to have the ability to create a motion J file, or a motion-free.json file, sorry, there are some drawbacks to it, and that is that you have to kind of manage the amount of shortcuts that are involved to make that happen. But it's worth kind of considering, and it's worth looking into for yourself and asking whether or not it's worth doing in that way. I personally still quite like the fact that I can use the breathing parameters to create a general passive idle animation, and that I don't have to worry about shortcuts so much. But of course the drawback of that is that you can't adjust the breathing or create any sort of timed interval. But yeah, that was something I wanted to touch on because, again, it's a cool feature, don't get me wrong, but it's whether or not you are okay with the management of all of the shortcuts that come with it. If you're someone who has more going on with your VTuber model, a little bit like how mine are always a little bit something more going on with them. But generally speaking, it can be good if you're someone who doesn't really have a lot of transformations, or you don't have a lot going on your VTuber model, but it's just your standard standing and chatting and talking with nothing much going on with it. It would be good. It would be kind of cool to have those kinds of idle animations that you can just play out and animate properly, and away you go. You'd be okay with it. But it's just worth kind of noting. It was something I wanted to just jump into and let you guys know about. Now, the mouth form. The last time that I was working in Vtube Studio, and it was mostly when it released, I noticed that there were a few little problems I was being faced. I needed to know exactly why this was happening, and I think I kind of figured it out. Generally speaking, there's nothing wrong with this method of creating a mouse shape. I have to emphasize that point. I still believe there's something in making a neutral state and a happy state, and even a frowning state here. The thing about it is, though, which is kind of odd, is that if your character is opening their mouth wide, so say for example, if you're yawning, and you should be making the O shape, right? You should be probably doing that. But it doesn't do that for some reason in Vtube Studio. It seems to take from this keyform here when your mouth is the most widest. Now, I don't really understand why that's happened, but it's an easy fix. Again, you can fix this quite easily, which is to go on this keyform here, highlight the keyform, click on select, Control-Shift-C, and then paste it into this one here, which is Control-Shift-V. So instead of having the teeth, you do have just another wide open mouth. Now, this really just depends on your character. Maybe you might prefer to try using the neutral O shape with your mouth, but personally, I don't know why. I feel like it does better if you use this keyform here, which is for the happiest, most open mouth state. If you copied and pasted the most happiest open mouth state to the far left where the frown is, that kind of fixes the problem. But yeah, don't ask me why that is. It's very strange because Vtube Studio takes into account your neutral mouse state quite heavily by default, which is good. And it certainly takes a lot into account for your smiling state. These are probably the most easiest for Vtube Studio to detect. But of course, it can't detect, sadly, the frowning state so much unless you make the settings do that. So you could actually adjust the model settings to be at a certain frowning state if you want. So what I mean by that, I can actually show you here. We currently have it at the ideal state right now, which is from 1 to -1. So currently we do have it set to as it should be, which is at neutral state, but we can change it so that there is a frowning state for the mouth. All you have to do is change it here. So instead of it being 1, we could make it -0.5 and click and press enter. And you can see that it sets the mouth to a more of a frown state. This is quite good because it means that maybe we can kind of have a little bit more control over what's considered neutral. So say, for example, if your character's a little bit too smiley, you can change that a little bit if you want to. So that's the great, awesome thing about Vtube Studio, is that you have a little bit more freedom of like what kind of expression you want to give your character and stuff in this regard. So if we go, say, -1, that's going completely sad on the spectrum. But yeah, it can be good for that. It would give you a lot of control. And it's worth it for that reason alone. But obviously, if you open your mouth, just bear in mind that it will take into effect what you've already put into your keyforms. Check it out, see how you feel, how it looks. You may need to edit it for also all of your expressions as well. So say, for example, with the angry expression here, you probably might need to do the same thing, because again, I've got this teeth showing on the far left keyform at the top here, so that means I'm probably going to have to, say, transfer what's on this far right to the far left here too. So there's going to be some tweaking with that too if you happen to have expressions. But like I say, it's worth it if you're someone who's wanting to, I guess, optimize it better. Because like for me, I yawn a lot on stream. I want an O shape or something resembling an O shape every time I yawn on stream. So it's like, otherwise it's going to look like that and it's just going to be completely not what it's supposed to be. So yeah, I would recommend changing this into an O shape. And in fact, the thing that I've learned too about the positioning of these keyforms is that they're a little bit more literal in its placement. So say, for example, with the neutral state right here, when you're talking in a neutral state on Vtube Studio, it's actually going up this list. Instead of it being randomized, because I think it was more randomized on FaceRig. Like the mouse shapes would just sort of like be randomized, like I say, a little bit like that. But now there's actually a little bit more sequence to it. So it goes from down here to the second keyform to the third keyform to the top keyform here. And the same for the happy state too. So if you're smiling, it's going to use these keyforms specifically for your smiling state. And if you're in between, then it does the same thing too. It's really nice, actually. It works really well. But of course, these frowning states here don't really work in a funny sort of way, except for this top keyform for some reason. Don't ask me why again, but that is a thing. But on the other hand, it's still kind of cool to have the option if you're wanting to, for whatever reason, give your character a bit of a frowny state of any kind, or even if you're going a little bit mid here or something, just to kind of give your character a little bit more of a neutral state. If you're wanting to just adjust it slightly, and instead it's going to kind of like refer to these sort of mouth shapes because you've kind of set the settings on Vtube Studio to be like this. That's kind of nice too, and it's worth kind of considering, and it will kind of like go from this point here to the happiest state here. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. It's a bit hard to describe, but there is far more freedom with Vtube Studio than there was in FaceRig, and I have to emphasize this point. It's a really good software and I do recommend it. You can actually get the software for free on Steam if you are curious about it and want to give it a go. I also have a video on the introductory to Vtube Studio. This all still applies, so feel free to check that video out and see what you think of it. It may take a little while to get completely adjusted to Vtube Studio and to get optimized and stuff, but believe me, it's worth it. And yeah, I hope this video was helpful in just getting to know how to optimize your model a little bit more. If you have any questions, let me know, and I hope to catch you all in the next video. Take care of yourselves out there, everyone, and have a good one. See you later, guys.